All right, we are back with Run with the Horses, the quest for life at its best. And we're in chapter 2. Um, the scripture is Jeremiah 1 1 through 2. Anybody want to read that for us? Not very much.
I can. The message of Jeremiah, son of Hilkiah, of the family of priests who live in Anathoth in the country of Benjamin. God's message began to come to him. What's in a name? The history of the human race is in names. And I don't think that's part of the scripture, though, is it?
No, that's the quote. You want to go ahead and read that quote?
Okay. Our objective friends do not understand since they move in a world of objects which can be counted and numbered. They reduce the great names of the past to dust and ashes. This they call scientific history. But the whole meaning of history is in the proof that there have lived people before the present time whom it is important to meet.
What do you think about that?
Um, I think people I think we often forget how important a name is, especially when it's mispronounced or they're called by something else. I think people identify with their names. It's who they are, quote, quote. It's a matter of not ego, but dignity and, you know, a sense of presence by having a name. My take on it, but
Yeah, the other side of that, Debbie, and I was reminded this weekend of a situation where uh, some people live off their name and not off their deeds.
true. You can put a lot of um, false value in your name, if you will. Um, I think that's entirely possible. And what that indicates to me is a lot of insecurity and lack of inner strength, maybe, a lack of faith, maybe.
Well, I found it interesting. We kind of talked uh, very briefly and touched on the idea of postmodernism, and I don't know if do y'all remember we talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, and so postmodernism is kind of like the antithesis to enlightenment, right? We've got that age of enlightenment and that age of reason, and then kind of the modern worldview came out of that, and then the postmodernism is a cynicism towards anything of scientific value, scientific rationalization.
Mhm.
And so I'm just really kind of seeing a theme in that. I think. Do y'all follow me on how y'all
Mhm.
see that in that quote?
Mhm. Yes.
The attack on the objective.
Yes. More things in the world and objects, and not people or feelings or compassion and everything that comes with that, or faith.
What's your take on that, Pops?
But think about objective versus subjective. They have to do with your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Um, think about, I don't know why this comes to mind, but the ancient Roman Emperor Nero. I think at the time, he was very popular and got along, but now, history showed him to be a not so good person. And so it's the perspective whether that is an objective or subjective. I really enjoyed reading the first part of this chapter because I was tracking with this guy saying, hey, that's me. But he was talking about how he grew up, and that was me.
Yeah, yeah.
Wandering around the woods, all that kind of stuff. And, I wanted to be the Davy Crockett or the whatever the hero was at the time. But then later on, when you learn different perspectives, and maybe we said this word truth, whatever, I think truth is how you interpret facts, and that interpretation of facts is affected by all sorts of things, whatever your history is and makeup is. An example that came to my mind is, again, the difference is this is Andrew Jackson. I probably all the way up through high school, I thought, Andrew Jackson is a hero. And it did some, all the stories and stuff that I heard and read about, and Tennessee history made him out to be a great hero. We had to take Tennessee history when I was in school. When I go to college, I start reading about the other stuff and how he absolutely just decimated and abused the Native Americans, and how he used his power to get his way, and how the whole thing in the Alamo was a setup, for his expansion stuff. So a lot of things that I found out later on were really showed me he was not that great a person, not that great a leader. And so I'll go back when I was a kid wanting to be like him. Maybe I was misled. Maybe my perspective was different.
Right. Well, you had a perspective based on the knowledge that you had at hand, and then when you're given different knowledge, your perspective certainly will change, like it did.
But both of them were truths at the time. To me, I interpreted the facts as that young person. That was the truth to me.
To you, yes. Well, don't you think that what we perceive as the truth isn't always the way it is? Our perceptions can distort what truly is the truth.
And I think that's where I find kind of a problem with that philosophy, to kind of go against the scientific evidence. Because if we do that and we create our own truths, right? That's a trendy thing to say now, right? Then what happens to those facts of history, as far as we think about like now the issue of how American history is portrayed in elementary schools across the country, right? And the idea of critical race theory. Well, I mean, there's some facts in there that what are we telling? Are we telling our truth, or are we telling the facts? Now, that's not to say that all of the human experience is described in numbers, right? There is more to life than that, but to disregard rational thinking and logic and objective facts, I just kind of have a problem with that kind of general philosophy. But and that's just a quick observation I made. I just found that interesting because of our last conversation.
But Max, think about what is scientific proof and what is generally accepted facts, and things that we say, okay, this is scientifically proved and no question about it, no doubt about it, here we are. What's that going to be in 20, 30, 40, 50 years? I mean, I go back to Darwin, for example, and part of Darwin's evolutionary theory was that men were better than women because of the evolutionary process. And what he said, okay, scientifically, you look at the size of a man's head versus the size of a woman's head. The size of a man's head generally is larger than a woman's head. Therefore, he got a bigger brain. Therefore, he's smarter. Those things and that ain't been that long ago as far as world history. And we know that's absolutely incorrect, but that was part of the scientific proof and how they interpreted those facts of scientific proof. Go back further than that, man looked at the sun going down over the ocean. Oh, it's got to be flat, you know, and that sounds crazy, but that was given scientific proof.
Mhm. You're right. They didn't have the knowledge or the experience or the tools to learn and to change that perception or change those facts that they gave people.
Which makes me wonder sometimes, what is the scientific proof that we take right now that's going to be proven incorrect in 50 years?
Well, that's true. Mhm.
Yeah, and I think that in reality there's a balance there. I'm just saying this idea, and I don't think to put a general idea on the author is unfair and inaccurate to do to anyone, right? But just in thinking of that idea of that postmodernism, I would say that to reject logical thinking allows for those fantasies to be created and carried through life that we're going to talk about in a little bit. And so I think where the truth probably lies is in balance of both of those things. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? But
I
not
agree.
devoid of
Right.
objective facts.
Well, that was
Um,
just the problem that I had with that first little statement there.
yeah,
Of,
right, right.
of
And that's why I said I was going to try to move on to that because you had already talked about it before. Um, when you talk about your experiences as a child and his experience as a child, what do you think about the idea as some people grow up, they become less?
Hmm.
well, I think what, at least the way I take that is that if you grow up and you continue to buy into those thoughts and ideas and truths that you perceived as a child, even in the light of facts and stuff that come out later on in life, that you refuse to admit I could be wrong.
Okay, okay, I didn't take it that way. Debbie, what do you think about that statement in the
Well,
book?
I think part of that has to do with the culture you're in, your family culture, where you live in the United States or whatever country you're in. Um, for instance, there was a long time where people didn't think graduating from high school was that important, or if they were graduating from high school, they certainly didn't go to college because that wasn't their culture, their family, or area's norm. People didn't do that, and that's changed, fortunately. But people were didn't advance themselves in an education a lot of times because of that. It's hard to step outside what you know into something you don't know.
So I think it's fair to say, as children, um, we seem to possess great creative forces, right? Great imaginative forces.
Mhm.
Um, and where where do those forces fall in line with our fantasies and as children and the realities? We those perceived truths to you. You know what I mean? That were really fantasies. The same thing for him, right?
Mhm.
And how does those creative forces, how can they transfer to the realities of life? Does that make sense?
Mhm. Boy,
Because it seems like what he's saying that you know almost through societal forces, oftentimes those forces are stifled and sometimes or many times diminished.
I
You
agree
think
with
that's
that.
correct?
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think times have changed, and maybe people have changed. And as I was just thinking of my own personal, you know, I state this because you all know this, but growing up in a very, very poor uh, economic situation, and you know, working parents, construction workers, that kind of stuff, and in my mind, the dream of being Perry Mason that we used to watch on TV
Mhm.
was just an abstract thing.
Mhm.
But as time goes on, I was, able to, go to college and go to law school and do criminal law and enjoy it. So, and maybe it's different now. Maybe Max, you might could tell more about your generation, maybe in the younger generations. But I just found that as being an abstract dream that sort of become true.
Mhm. Yeah, I
But
don't know.
and I think that might be an outlier. Um, I think it can almost be observable that many adults at work often become run down and monotonous and get involved in that strive to earn, right, and lose that focus of living that fantasy of being Perry Mason, that it becomes more about the routine of the job to earn money to provide these things
Mm.
and operate within society.
Yeah, that's the, I think that's a point right there, operate within society. Because sometimes I think the society you're in tends not to support you to go beyond what's right in front of you, to progress.
Why is that?
Fear that you'll be different, you'll be better, you won't stay, you'll move, um, that you'll become better than they are. I think there's a lot of reasons. I think, the fear of the unknown, and it has something to do with it.
I don't think, Debbie, the fear of the unknown it's a different view from what I would call the world view and what I call the Christian view. And at least in my mind, the Christian view, we don't really have to worry about the unknown. We have we have something there to rely upon, and so I can go out and take a chance to go to this school or try this to do whatever, because I know in the end that God's got it.
Mhm.
That's the Christian view, I think. But then versus the world view is just what sort of what you're describing. Oh, maybe I need to stay in the norm. Maybe I don't need to try this. Maybe,
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're correct, but I think it's difficult even for Christians who have that faith to keep that in the forefront, knowing that that faith is there, that you'll be supported. I think that's a struggle for many people. um, and you have to still go back and work on your faith and work on just pushing ahead for what you see as your dream or fantasy, to get where you'd like to be, and still remembering that God is there pushing you along as well. I think that's a hard job, but as Christians, we should have that kind of, where that should be part of our faith journey. That should be that we have that kind of faith all the time. But I don't know that I do all the time. I don't know that anybody does all of the time.
Well, no, I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
But I guess at my age, you can kind of look back at it now and say, well, yeah, that sort of worked out uh,
Right,
because I see God's hand in it now. All at that time, I maybe I didn't.
right, right. Or that things worked out for the better, that you didn't get what you wanted, that there was a different plan for you, that it wasn't meant for you, that God had other things in mind for you. But some of it, I think, has to do with what we choose, and not remember that God is there to support us. We make choices that aren't so good sometimes, but I think overall, when we focus on what we think is our ability to have God be there and have that faith, I think we accomplish a lot more and don't let fear get in the way. So, just my take.
Well, it seems like we're hitting on a lot of what the author gets to in the book. I feel like, as far as the fulfillment of life isn't necessarily attached to your vocation, right? That's kind of what we're getting at, right?
Yes.
And I think that's what the author wants to get to in this chapter. And looking at Jeremiah, he did live an active life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Up until he was carried off, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
He and could have probably been active after that. Um, so the book of Jeremiah opens up with Jeremiah's name. Um, Debbie, you kind of talked about the importance of a name. What do you think? Where do you think the importance of the name is? Is it in the name, or is it in the act of naming, or is there a little bit of all of that?
I think there's a little bit of all of it. I think a name can mean heredity, it can mean culture, it can mean promise, it can mean faith, it can mean a lot of different things. It depends on where you are and what culture you're in and what your faith is. I think I hate to use the word label, but it's like it gives you a sense of who you are. I'm Debbie, and I automatically know how I relate to that word. It's who I am, like the basis of who I am. Um, but I don't know. That's just my thoughts on it, though.
Did either of y'all name your children?
What did you read? Because you broke up there for a sec. What did
Did
you
you
say?
did you name your children?
Yes.
What was that experience like for you?
Um, I like the sound of my daughter's first name. I liked, and her middle name is my middle name, so that was familial. That was in our family. Um, yeah, it was a combination, but I automatically, when I named her, that's who I saw. You're not just a baby. I saw Rachel Lee. And so it was identity. Um, and I don't know I don't know another way to explain it.
What's your experience?
My experience was them being an individual, being
Mm-hmm.
different, and standing out and living up to the I wanted my family part of it. Like my dad's middle name is my son's middle name,
Okay.
so that's kind of been the thing that's been passed down because my oldest brother too. He's kind of like a junior, but not. But he's Cedric Terrell, and my dad's name's Lawrence Terrell. And I have
Uh-huh.
Baylor Terrell, so I just something special and
Yes.
meaningful.
An identity
Yeah,
and that connectedness.
right.
I think that's a good way to put it for sure. Yeah. It's a um what do you call it? Oh, a a lineage. Is that the correct term? Um, and it's something you identify with and gives you, at least with me, gives me a sense of presence. Like my Charlie's family was originally from Perth, Scotland, so the name Drummond, I automatically identify with Scotland and being from that area and what that entails. And I think, the kids in our family did as well. Um, so yeah, I think you're exactly right.
Pops, what's your perspective on that?
Well, I wish I'd had a more of an opinion with the girls, uh, because I think particularly after really getting into this biblical womanhood thing, I wish I'd have had more to say about that, or opinionate. I don't know, but of course I had a very strong opinion of, and looking back at that, it's not. I hate that I didn't have a strong opinion about the girls as I did you.
Yeah,
I can
and
see
so the
that.
author talks about those things as far as that act of naming is a personal and individual thing, and it's creating that being as a personal entity rather than a number, right? And that's still,
Mhm.
going away from the idea of objectiveness or rational
Mhm.
thought or whatever. Um, but it is that act of naming. It seems to me what we've all talked about, and kind of what happened with Jeremiah as well. At least in the book, when it goes on to talk about his father and where he's from, is it's the summation of all of that family's history
Mhm.
and all of that and all of the future
Mhm.
all all at once in that moment in time.
Correct. Correct. I
And you
agree.
know, the next child, even in the same family, is that same thing.
Yes.
Is the complete history of that family
Yeah.
and the entire future at that present moment
Hmm.
in time.
And I think it was more important for that culture than say ours. I mean, it is important for ours, but sometimes we forget how significant it was for those people in biblical times.
Hmm. Or that this person begot this one, this one, this one, this one begot that one, and I mean it's a down the line where you know where you came from and who
But,
you are.
think about this, Debbie. Jesus, son of Joseph of Nazareth.
Hmm.
What all did that take off?
Yeah. Mm. I don't know that I could put that into words.
Yeah.
I can see why that would have created some hardship for Jesus when he started his, ministry. Certainly in the people that knew him already, they may not have taken very kindly to that.
Well, even the leaders of the temple, when
Mhm.
Jesus come up, some of those guys made the comment, "Well, isn't that guy from Nazareth? Well, what good ever came out of Nazareth?"
Yeah.
No, so there you
Yeah.
got that.
Yeah. Well, I think there's, places here in this country or families in this country still are all around that, it's the same thing, what good did come out of that family or this area or that town or that holler, you know?
Yeah, there were in a little area where I grew up in Laverne, there were at least two sets of Carters,
Ah,
and when they found out that Joe Carter was my dad. Well, you know, he's a pretty good old boy. He's a hard worker kind of thing. If I'd have been the other Carter, it might not have been so good. So, you know, it
Yes.
was a, yeah.
Well, and you're right there. I mean, it's by name. With a name, it kind of identifies your quality, your character, your integrity, your faith.
Well, I remember a lot of the old people, particularly around the Glade and in that area,
Mhm.
they found out a lot. You're Maxwell's boy. Oh, okay, you're all right. You know,
Boy,
yeah,
we got to talk to them.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
It's very interesting to look at a name that way, for
Yeah.
sure.
What about this? He makes the statement that at birth we are named, not numbered. I thought there was. I kind of chuckled at that. What? And then there was another. Where does he say? It says something about we are not assessed for our economic potential and given a cash value. Are we not though? Are we not given a number and estimated for your value?
Well, it depends on where you are. You know, from the legal standpoint, if you were, and I was involved in a number of cases of personal injury, and the person that's older does not have the length of time left, so their pain and suffering over the years is not going to be as great as the younger, so their value is less than the younger person, just from the legal standpoint.
Well, and if you talk about it from the birth part, you have a number. If you're not named, you have a number. And there's you'll forever will have a number. That medical record number will be attached to you, not necessarily your name if you're not named right away, but you'll have a number.
But then
Well,
again,
and I'll tell you something else. Before all of my children were born, I bought a life insurance. Before they were born, I purchased life insurance policies,
Mhm,
and there was a value, a cash value
mhm,
assigned to them.
mhm.
So I just don't I just kind of chuckled when I read that. I don't know, as cynical as he seems to be, um, that's maybe I'm being cynical, or it just seems a little naive to
well,
say
think
that.
about this, Max. If you were born at a particular date, the Prince of Wales is born at a particular date. Who's worth more at their birth? Prince of Wales, right?
Well, and so I think it gets back to a lot of it is what do you value when you talk about worth, right? And I'm just talking about an economic value, and you are too. Certainly, the Prince of Wales has more economic value, and that. But I'm just saying that is kind of assigned, at least in our society, at birth.
Mhm. But
Well, the
don't
other
you?
part of value really is not able to determine that till later on in life. Maybe when you get on the right side of the dash. You've heard the dash, you know, when you go to the tombstones, you read born this date dash that date.
Oh, okay.
When you get to that date, you look back and say, okay, what was this guy's reputation, or what was this guy? How did he deal with people? What was his value in life? Uh,
Did he make the world a better place?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
But
that is what's going to be represented by their name
Mhm.
more than their estate or the cash economic value, right? It'll be
Right.
those things.
But
Um,
don't you think is a monetary value, maybe indirect, when a child is born into a family that they'll go to school, get an education, go to college, get a good job? I mean, indirectly to me, that seems like it is a cash value that they earn a living, they succeed in success in the world. I guess it depends on how you look at it again.
Well, you're talking about the person that is a value to society. What about that other person that's a dredge to society?
Oh boy.
they're assessed as well. I mean,
Exactly.
they are, and they're given a cash value as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And living up to the name, like with Prince Harry. I mean, they're taking
Mm-hmm.
all his stuff away from him
Yes.
just because he's not living up how to the standards of the royalty life.
Good point. Good point. And you're right. And they've been, well, and that happens when we lived in Utah. If you didn't live up to what they thought you should within that certain religious area, you were shunned. You didn't exist in the family because you
Right.
didn't meet this standard and this standard. And I think that happens in religious areas,
Right.
regardless of the
You can
denomination.
still keep the name and wear the name. And even if maybe if it's like to the world or how they want you to live, even your family, they might stray away from the name or think it's a certain way to do it. But long as
Yeah,
you represent yourself and get to back on track and or the right way of life, then you're still representing yourself and of course family.
right.
Don't let no man take that away from you. Your
No,
name.
no, never. But that's hard to step out of your family expectations and demands to do what is best for you. It's whether it's education, whether it's career, whether it's faith, whether it's, it's a hard thing to leave that culture behind or that support behind and go your own way that is better for you. It
Well, think about Jeremiah though. Would he have been considered economically successful at the time of his life?
I don't know.
We look back at it now, and his reputation is great now. What would his reputation have been then? I mean, you look at how he was treated. He
Mhm,
was put in prison a couple of times, thrown in the dungeon to die, and
mhm.
finally kidnapped and taken off to who knows where. I mean, if you look at him at that time, I'm not sure he would have been looked at as being a very uh, reputable, successful person.
No.
But the proof is in years later, looking back at what he said and what he did. Uh, was in God's favor.
But don't you think that to some people or to some extent that may have been true even in his time, but he was going against the accepted norm in that area, and that he was presenting putting out there a whole new faith world that the people from there weren't buying into very easily.
I think it's a typical history of I think you look at the minority view of a lot of things in history.
Mhm,
Minority view, the people that are shunned, a lot of times end up being what's right in the long run.
mhm,
The Apostle Paul. You know, if you look at his life, he was an outcast from his own society. He was run out of town numerous times. He was put in prison, beaten. You know, and he was a very minority view. But we look at him now as being an apostle.
yeah.
Well,
Well,
they were minority views to the elite and the ruling class. I
bingo.
don't. The Apostle Paul had a very strong, you know, middle income following. I mean, these churches in Corinth and Ephesus and Philippi were not made up of no one.
Mhm.
Yeah, but
But
if you,
and just like with Jeremiah, he was probably by the general people may have been greatly accepted, but by the elite to who he was speaking against, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah, I'm not even sure that the majority of the people would have appreciated either one of them. There may have been a minority of them that supported and
Well, I
yeah,
mean, I think that the people that were living in Judea that were experiencing the Babylonian army could probably, I side with Jeremiah and those elite inside Jerusalem said, "No, we're not going to listen to you." And yeah, they didn't look so favorably on him.
you know, I don't know how brainwashed the majority of the people were into the idea that, you know, because we are Hebrews and because we're in Jerusalem, we're going to be okay.
But there's more to Judea than just Jerusalem. I'm talking about the people in the rest of the country.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I don't know.
And those other cities, that were there. But anyway, so often in our society, I think the author may have contradicted himself a little bit. In our society, we are given a number and an economic unit, and often a lot in life. There is some mobility in that, but we end up in some type of job with some type of title, right? And there's often in life people become more of what their title is than who they are, what their name is. Would y'all agree with that? Kind of that Carl Jung thing. We are what we do. Isn't that what Jung said?
Well, I think in the work world, yeah, we do. We look at, if we're not careful, we identify with what we do. And that's kind of that's to me, a shaky ground to be on.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a bad thing. You know, it doesn't matter what you do, what your
Right.
profession is how you treat people around you.
Well, true. But sometimes people really identify with what they do and they don't see themselves outside of their job or their profession. And they kind of look at the world that way. But I think you're right. Any value we have as human beings is how we treat people.
Maybe that's
Period.
like another alter ego type thing, because if you're a judge or a doctor, that's who you go by. That's what you reassigned your name to
Right.
be better or think you are better.
Well, I've seen, yeah, and it's true of all walks of education in this life, whether it's a professor, a scientist, or a manager of something, or a head of a crew, whatever. You can see that same kind of um, self-love, and I think some of it comes from self-importance and maybe a basis of insecurity. The title's worthless. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, to me, I've had a title. My husband had a title, but I want to tell you, it doesn't make a lot of difference. It doesn't. You're
But
still
it
basically,
can open doors. It can get you
yes,
into places and where you can, you know, Jesus again, the title Messiah. What did that mean? Jesus, the son of Joseph the carpenter. What did that mean? You know, and so all those things do
mhm,
can be good stuff if you
Yes,
use
about
them.
who you know too, though. Jesus, if you have your hand on Christ, that's you don't have to. You're an individual, but you know the right people to draw yourself to. Importance and not just focuses on titles and things like that. The most important person, we want to know is Christ for sure.
right,
Right.
right,
The point of that is if I use that title or that influence to glorify God to further God's kingdom, or do I use it to glorify self? That's
correct.
that's the difference.
But there again, it goes back to be how you treat people, how if you're kind and caring
All
and
right.
that kind, it goes all the way back to love, period. And that's something we've all been given, that's what we're called to do. is to love people, love one another. And I think, you know, somehow people lose that. I lose it sometimes when I don't stay focused and when I get overwhelmed or I'm afraid. And there again, I'm human, but it's something, you know, you strive for and push for.
I was thinking about the various names of God that the ancient Hebrews had, and they all meant something different. For example, Yahweh Rapha, the Lord our healer, uh, Yahweh Shalom, the Lord of peace. And there's a bunch of them. El Roy, the strong one who sees. El Shaddai Roy, God Almighty. And it goes on. There's a whole list of them. Y'all seen this list of names of God or titles of God.
Wow.
But when it come down to it, what did when he was asked what is his name, what did he say?
I am.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I am. So what does that mean?
Mm.
He's the gate. He's the way.
Yeah, I am is not that I was, not that I will be. And I am. There's three tenses in at least in normal human language, and he surpasses all that. But Simpson says, "I am." It
Mhm.
says, there is no beginning, there is no end. I am. Well, what does that mean for us if we're going to be God-like?
Then we're here. We'll always be here. He'll always be here. We are. We are part of that I am. We're not the I am, but we're part of that.
To be or not to be, that is the question.
We are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Period.
and I think what y'all are saying and what y'all are alluding to is exactly what the author's trying to get to. In our society, we are given a number and we are led into a title, and we can be lost within that title.
Yeah.
But we are more than the title. We are who we are, and we should remember who we are. And if someone can grab Psalms 82, we can be reminded. Psalms 82. Nobody knows what Psalms 82.
I would,
No.
but my hands are busy right now.
Oh, well, that's important.
Just to remind us who we are and who Jeremiah was as well. Let me find it here. I should have been ready. Boom. Read Psalms 82:6 right there.
I said, "You are gods. You are all sons of the Most High."
Children of the Most High God.
Mm-hmm.
That's who we are.
Yep.
Um, what else? We've gotten into a lot of stuff.
We've only gone 2 pages. I just want to tell you.
I'm on 27.
You're on 27?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I must have missed you because I had more stuff.
Okay, well, what else we got then?
Well, no, it was just some of the comments.
Yes.
I mean, that was all. I mean, if you're on 27, I'll agree with you. But I mean, but I had just underlined different just different
Well,
different statements.
yeah. Well, I mean, that section of what's in a name, and I think that's what we were saying is what he was trying to get at with that individual name, that we are more than just that economic unit or whatever title.
Exactly. There's
Um,
one statement in here that I thought he says, if I am frequently and authoritatively treated impersonally, I begin to think of myself the same way, especially if your name is not used. If someone treats you like you, or they, or him, or her, and don't use your name, you are depersonalized. It takes some of your dignity away from you and who you are. I thought that was a good point.
I feel like too that we focus too much on the individual as a person, and that's what beats that person down, because you're separating yourself from everybody and putting yourself to a higher level. And I mean, you kind of isolate yourself and you put yourself by yourself to make yourself scared. So you, us as a world, like that's not, we do the Jordans and we want Beyonce's or Taylor Swift. So when you put that name or try to individualize yourself, you're creating, you know, the wrong, future for others to follow, because we're focusing too much on ourselves
Correct.
or our
I,
name.
I think there's a good point where it's a combination of group mentality, individualism, and they each have their value, but to go overboard for one specific person because of what they do, who they are, what they have, you get into trouble that way because you
Yeah.
lose your value, I think. So good point. I think
Or do you believe it? You mean it's not all about me?
no, it's not.
No.
I'm sorry, but
No.
it's not.
It's all about Beyonce, and she did not mean what she said to bring
I
up
love
Beyonce and all
Beyonce. I'm
that.
just saying, just people in general cannot live up to. That's what we want, but
How
sometimes
many
it might be
people get to
bad.
be how many people get to be a Beyonce? I mean,
Right. I
you
can't
know,
wake up.
or whoever has the time. I mean, how many people get to be Aubrey Carter?
Wow.
Nobody.
Really?
I think that's kind of what he started. The author started that theme, right? As far as we all have an opportunity to live a radical, full life
Right.
in God. That if we do attach to what our meaning is, our personal meaning, not some title or something that's given, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's exactly right, um, and that not that our titles aren't important, and what we do is important, but not it's what we value. Are we valuing the dollar amount, the cash assessment, or are we valuing things that are spiritual, or just human? Maybe not even spiritual, just humanity. Or do we value humanity, or do we value wealth?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I
So
think title and position can help you, like your dad said, help humanity to make things better for people, to create things that make life easier for people who feed the poor and the hungry and things like that. It's when it goes the other way and it's all about me that you lose your value as a human being.
how is naming a way of hoping? The author says names not only address what we are now, but also calls us to what we will become.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of what I was saying earlier when I said that a child is the summation of all of their family's past and all of the future in that present moment.
Exactly.
I feel like that's what he's getting at.
Yeah, I agree. Well, there's the line above that. It says, it was the Jeremiah to whom the word of the Lord came, who realized his authentic and eternal being. And that's what happens to us, I think, in this world. It's we if we live by the word of God, and if we value humanity and we help and we live by faith, that we are authentic, and it's just cause it, our family progresses from that in a child. It just goes on and it repeats itself. I think that's
Or on the other hand, is that child doomed to be that? I mean, there was a guy here in our area. I mean, I prosecuted him, but he had a child and he named his child Cocaine. You know, so that child couldn't help that.
yeah, yeah, that's sad. That's really sad. It speaks volumes.
Yeah, but what about the child? You know,
Yes.
it doesn't. You know, and I don't know. You know, what I hope the child does great things, but you know,
Yeah,
with
it's a
that,
story to tell. They can be like, why do you have that name? Hopefully, he lives beyond that name, but maybe his father was trying to have a story to tell to bring out their family history over time, like with Christ. You know, he has followers, and we are his kids, so we also have a story, you know, to tell about, you know, the family, or, you know, Christ, and,
yeah.
you know, but that's very odd.
Yeah.
And so that kind of brings us to what my next note, and Debbie, don't let me go pass anything up, but the meaning of that name, the meaning of all our names, and even that name cocaine, is defined within the relationships around that individual.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
What do you think about that, Pops?
Certainly influenced. I don't know defined, but you know, like I hope that this person
Or
that,
what they said, the meaning of our name is created through the relationship.
yeah, and again, I just hope that you know, and I'm judgmental, but I got to think that this guy that named his kid Coach Kane going to have some effect on that kid, and I hope that it's not negative like I think it probably would be,
Ah,
and so maybe this kid uh, does better because of that. I don't know. I hope that's wrong. You know, we can look at these, you know, these great
You don't think
heroes in the
that
Bible, the
father?
Jeremiahs and all these things, and say, oh, these guys, you know, turned out okay. But is that the average Joe out here in the street? Was that the average Joe in Jerusalem at the time?
probably not.
What else? So we're not gonna buy into the name as a way of hoping. That's what we was kind of the author was trying to say here.
I think some people yes, and some people no. I don't I don't think I can generalize that.
I think it's it depends on the culture, the family situation you're in. It can be a way of hoping, but it can also be like what your dad brought up. You know, it could be a very detrimental thing to the child. Or if you give a child a very odd name, you know, or one that can be made fun of, then you have a different, you know, why would you do that and not give a name that would enhance what that child could be, or, in the future. So,
I'm just not so sure many people think about that.
no.
Well, maybe not in what the actual meaning of the name, and that's what the author says, that the meaning of a name is not in the etymology or the historical makeup of the word. The
Mhm.
meaning of the name is created within the relationship between the mother and the father and the people whoever comes up with the name, not in the actual literal definition of the words or of the name. I think that's what the author was trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
And for it to be a way of hope, I think what we're getting at is not naming. I don't name my child George Washington hoping he's going to be a president, but just the fact that I gave the child a name, an individual name, creates hope for that individual life. Nothing to do with whatever the name may be. It's the spirit that the name was given. And your example of the name cocaine is the antithesis of that. It is the spirit of which that name was given, but it still is the relationships around that father that gave that name meaning. It doesn't mean a plant that grows in South America that you can make chocolate out of. It means the further processed plant that's used as a drug, right? Because of those relationships around that person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in
Y'all
my
see, you
mind,
see, does that make sense in our rational view?
my
Even though we're
mind's
rejecting rational views here.
my mind's just chasing a rabbit trail. Just because I think about George Foreman. George Foreman, one of the greatest fighters ever was, had a bunch of kids, and named all the boys George Foreman.
Really?
You know,
Oh, well, there's just not enough words for that.
I mean, he's proud of his name, and I am too. But I don't,
I mean, but really? Love
I don't know.
yourself that much?
I never interviewed the guy to find out why he did it. I just thought it was kind of interesting.
It is. I didn't know that. Oh,
He said one of the kids are gonna get it right.
Do what?
He said one of them are gonna they're gonna get it right, like they're gonna be just like him.
I guess. I mean, the guy's a great guy. I've loved to watch him fight, and he's a great entrepreneur, and just thought some reason that came to my mind.
it certainly gives a different perspective on the
Yeah.
name part.
Okay.
Anyway.
Well, back to Jeremiah here. Is there any more comments on that?
No.
Or on the chapter at all? I'm kind of wrapping it up here. Well,
That's pretty much all my notes.
Well, the author went on to talk about how during Jeremiah's time there was idol worship, and he kind of equated that to our modern act of consumerism, and he made that analogy in the first chapter, right? And so saying that now we worship the ritual of shopping, and went on to talk about that the task of faith communities in our time, just as in Jeremiah's time, is to refocus society's view back on God, or at least our communities back on God, and the completeness of God. Any thoughts on that?
Well, and I just was going back again some of the ancient history stuff about the different gods, and Melchizedek came to my mind, the guy that Abraham
Mhm.
came in contact with after having some sort of successful military venture. And anyway, Melchizedek was considered to be a priest of the Most High God. That was a name or a title for him.
Mhm.
There were other gods and so forth, and so that other people would have been identified with whatever other god in that town or city or community would have been. So yeah, I think that's a question, Max. I don't know.
Um, so what the author was kind of talking about in this quest, what's the time? Sorry, let me look at it. The quest for life at its best, right? Is that we're seeking to have a fullness with God, and not any of us are complete in that fullness at
Mhm.
this very moment, but it's a process. And by continually to refocus our sights um, towards that completeness is kind of our role as faith communities and as Christians and prophets in our own world. Um, and then we are in that process of becoming. And I think that's kind of your word, that sanctification, right? That's that process of becoming uh, complete in God. Um, and so, as far as Jeremiah, when we look at the what his name actually means, do y'all? I'm sure, Dad, do you know what his name, what they'd say his name could have meant?
I don't recall. I remember it said in there, but I don't recall.
You got that one, Debbie?
No, I didn't. I remember reading it, but
So it's
the
either the Lord exalts or it's the Lord hurled. And looking at Jeremiah's life, they both kind of fit, right? Either one of them could fit. Um, and what the author went on to say is that, Jeremiah pretty much could have had three roles for in his in as a priest, three professional roles as a priest in his
Mhm.
time, and that would just be a prophet, uh, a priest like his father, or some type of wise man, and they could be kind of run of the mill roles is kind of what the author was saying, that they could have been that, but Jeremiah chose to follow God's path and
Mhm.
ended up living a very radical and eccentric life.
So it may have really been a bullfrog.
Yeah. All right, cool tools.
Dress him up. I can't take him even on Zoom.
Well, I don't know. I think my biggest takeaway, other than kind of the comments on postmodernism and those ideas, is we should embrace our individuality. We should embrace our I am, our name,
Mhm.
right? And not be reduced to a single role in life, you know, but to try to live in as much of that completeness or that fullness of God as we can.
Mhm.
And that was a Shakespearean thing, to be or not to be. Be. God wants you to be.
Mhm.
Or it's even more than that. You are. As he said, I am,
Yeah.
you are. We
Mhm.
just have to live in that.
Mhm.
Well, somebody say amen. Say amen when you can.
Be all you can be. Join the army.
No. Well, uh, Well, be all you can be and be in this world and follow God's word. I mean, that's what it's all about. As Christians, we believe that. And we are here and we are, like Max says, but we have a lot to live up to and a lot to do. It's hard work, but it's doable. Yeah.
All right. Any other final thoughts?
No, I think I'm good. I've put enough out there.
Well, good. Well, I just in that idea of living who we are, I think I just really like this verse from Psalms 82, and just remember who we are. And as the psalmist wrote, that you are God's, you are all children of the Most High.
Yes.
That's what got Jesus crucified.
All right.